Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Lankering. I'd like to welcome you back to Healthy Lifestyles. Excited to be here and appreciate Grassroots TV for the opportunity to get the information. And also our underwriters for the show, Aspen Core Realty, Sally Christ and Mark Kwasinski. They've been in the Valley for a long time. They've been in the community. They're very interested and committed to creating good in the community. And so that's why they're excited about helping us out with this show to get the message. So Aspen Core Realty is a great company to work with, and I encourage you to support them and check them out and have them help you with any of your real estate issues that you're dealing with. So I'm excited to be here, and just to give you a little introduction for myself. I call myself a bioenergetic chiropractor. I've been in the Valley practicing for over 30 years. And by bioenergetic, I mean bio is life and energetic is energy. So it's life energy. And if you think of a triangle, in the middle is optimal health. And the different types of stressors, 6 different types of stressors. The points of the triangle would be physical or structural. Gravity is the constant stress we all have. But here in this community, a lot of gravity sports, a lot of physical activities going on. And then another point of the triangle is biochemical or nutritional. These are things that are not in the body that should be. And another point of the triangle is mental and emotional stress, which is huge. It's the emotional pain that a lot of people are suffering with is incredible these days. And then the other aspects, the sides of the triangle, would be electromagnetic radiation. Another side would be toxins. And then another side would be infections and allergies. So my approach that I work with is looking at the person as a whole, taking these different types of stressors into play, and how they do affect the quality of our lives. So with that, it gives you a little bit of insight as to where the focus of the show is. And as you're well aware of, over the years, I've brought you information about different stressors or different things that affect the quality of our life. And so with that, today I'm excited to welcome back a guest that I've had on the show before and have a great response, and really have developed a wonderful respect for this gentleman. So I'd like to introduce John Bruna. John, welcome back, and great to have you. And give us a little introduction about yourself. You have a great history there.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. It's always a joy to be here. And my name's, of course, John Bruna, but the deeper introduction is co-founder of a Mindful Life program and the director of the Way of Compassion Foundation. And this has been an opportunity for me to share some of the lessons in life I've learned. I've had the great benefit of life filled with different learning opportunities. Right. Everything from living under a bridge and homeless, being raised in an atmosphere with, a mom raising 9 kids,
wow.
To being the senior account manager of a management healthcare corporation. And in between there, an auto mechanic, a dishwasher. I was fortunate enough to get a college degree, become a school teacher, a counselor and a therapist, a Buddhist monk for 6 years of my life. And now the opportunity to live here in the Roaring Fork Valley and share some of the lessons that have helped me transform my life.
So with it, I mean, that's quite a journey that you've been on, right?
A little bit.
And so, I mean, one of the things I think that probably stands out is the Buddhist monk aspect, certainly living underneath a bridge. I mean, a single mom with 9 kids. Does anything stand out for you? And today we're kind of talking about emotional balance and so forth. So I think a lot of people go through different challenges, and emotions are huge. I mean, they are just amazing at the impact that they have on our lives. So is there one area that was kind of like a turning point for you, an emotional turning point for you?
Yeah, actually, going back 30 years ago, that was an epiphany that changed my life. And it was a very direct realization that all the suffering that I had had in my life, and I'd lived in challenging environments and drug and alcohol and violent areas, and had lost things and been homeless. But the epiphany was simply this, that the cause of my suffering was not in my environment. It wasn't in other people or places or things, the events of my life. The real source of my suffering in life was me and my actions. And the flip side of that meant that the source of my happiness and well-being is only going to come from one place. But I had this epiphany. I had this very direct realization in August 20th, 1984.
Oh, really? Huh?
Yeah.
Huh. You want to share that? I mean,
well,
not through the whole experience, but kind of what was that catharsis that you went through?
That catharsis happened as a direct result of emotional pain, and we do not want to sell that short. Pain is often this thing we seek to avoid at all costs, but in fact, pain is the opportunity to grow. Pain is what allows us. You're in the profession of healing people, and pain informs us, right? It informs us of what's wrong, what needs to be looked at, what do we need to focus on. And in that particular situation, it was, drugs and alcohol were a big part of my life. I grew up, I boosted liquor from the liquor store when I was 10 even, and that was what I thought would fix me. And that's what actually led me to homelessness and a lot more emotional pain. And on that day in August of 1984, having hurt someone I loved deeply one more time,
wow,
and having her stand over me, and I wanted her to kick me or spit on me or something, and the shame and the guilt I had, but actually all she could do was cry, because she loved me, and it was in that moment of seeing her pain, seeing the cause that I was, and so much wanting to be different, that out of that deep, what we call pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralizing, shame and guilt, that the epiphany arose, that all this suffering wasn't the environment, it wasn't the situations, it was me. And from that level of pain, this little revelation gave me a new path. It wasn't, I didn't know what to do with it yet.
Right.
But it began the journey of now 30 years in recovery, no drugs or alcohol for over 30 years, and developing a way of living that cultivates inner peace, gratitude, a way of living meaningfully that transformed the shame and the guilt, the low self-esteem into an embodied experience of a meaningful life.
Right.
That's much richer and allows me inner joy and peace regardless of the outside circumstances. So knowing that the pain didn't come from out there, the pain did, but the suffering, the internal suffering, and by suffering I'm talking about mental afflictions like resentment, jealousy, shame, guilt, these types of sufferings, that then I had the opportunity to transform my experiences in ways that would cultivate joy, loving kindness, compassion, tranquility. But it was in here, not out there.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, pain is a great motivating factor. And I certainly find it in my practice. And, when people cannot do the things they want to be doing in life, or in the situation you're talking about, when they hurt people, but pain is a great motivating factor. And a lot of these, what we call or negative emotions, are really calls to action, that I think the universe or our bodies are trying to tap on our shoulder and say, hey, we want to get your attention over here. And I think that the pain continues to increase. And my understanding is that, people will make decisions either seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. So when that pain gets to be so much, and the leverage from that pain is so much, is when people will start going, okay, I surrender, I'll give up and I'll listen. One of the things I think that you kind of touched on was that I think a lot of people go, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. Yeah, that it's up to me and so forth. And a lot of people kind of give that lip service. But to really take ownership of the situation that we're in, and to really take accountability for what's going on is easier said than done for a lot of people. And I think a lot of it goes with the emotions and the subconscious and patterns that have been developed, but which are protective and survival mechanisms that we work with. So what's your take on some of those things?
Well, absolutely. I think a key point that you just nail on the head, we've heard our whole life that happiness is an inside job, right? Grandma Jones can tell us that. Has that really helped anybody? Because, well, what's that mean, it's an inside job? Well, how does that work in my life? we have lip service to it.
Right.
And so what we really want to think about is, what are the methods that I'm talking about if it's an inside job? What are the things in my life that are going to cultivate inner peace, genuine happiness, we call it, rather than what we tend to mistake for it, which is a stimulus-driven pleasure. As you talk about, we seek pleasure, we want to avoid pain. Well, there's an interesting word to use there is negative emotions. And when we really think about it, there's really no negative emotions, right? There's just emotions.
Right.
There's a time for sadness. You lose a loved one, that's healthy. So emotions serve us well. They keep us alive. And pain comes in here, and sadness and so forth. And in balance, emotions really do us well, even the ones we don't want.
Right.
And as you talked about, pain becomes this motivating force. Well, our problem lies in two areas. One is we really overestimate the level of pain or the level of suffering any outside event will grant us. And this is the cause. There's a great quote: "The search for happiness is the source of much unhappiness."
Right. Right. Once you start the journey, it's like you can't stop.
Right,
it's
right.
like, oh man, this is not what I planned on. This is, type of situation. to
Yeah,
go
I'm
along with.
seeking this, and it's great because if just this happens, I'll be happy. There's a Harvard researcher, Dan Gilbert, who has some great TED Talks and some incredible research on this science of happiness. And he'll say that we just are completely wrong about the degree in which and the intensity events in our life will have on our life. So, for example, he'll make really dramatic things. If you win the lotto or if you lose your legs, a year later, who's going to be happier? And the answer is neither. What happens is we have this sort of general sort of set point, and our level of happiness is basically on this level. So we have these really nice events that happen. I'm a little happier, and then it comes back down. Something terrible happens, it goes down, and then I adjust. And what happens over a year is you're going to find that the person who won the lotto and the person who lost their legs have returned to their basic set point. And there's some research that has shown that whether you're getting married, whether you're getting divorced, whether you've won an award, whether you've had this college degree and a big achievement, all of these big things in our lives that we think are going to really make us happy, there's a lot of research now that says if it happened more than 3 months ago, it has almost no impact on your level of well-being.
It's interesting because I think there are a couple of things. Number one, it makes me think of no events have meanings until we give them meanings. So there's a conscious aspect. And then with the brain, there's the neocortex, which deals with the conscious reasoning, logic, and so forth. And then there's the midbrain that deals with the emotions and so forth. And that's subconscious. So, and some of the research I've read is that subconscious is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the conscious. And when they're incongruent is when there's problems. But when we get those congruent, and the mind, body, or the conscious and the subconscious, the rational and the emotional working together, then life flows a lot easier. That chi, that different things. Although I think, though, that some emotional wounds do have an impact on the nervous system and do get triggered. And so it's interesting, maybe consciously we might not be aware, but I think subconsciously some of the emotions that get triggered, we're not even aware that they're getting triggered. I mean, we can talk about family events and holidays and stuff coming up, and some of the times that those family situations can be so difficult is because we're just getting triggered by what Uncle Joe is doing and Sister Susie and whoever else is, doing what, and they're not doing anything to trigger us. They just did something that did trigger us, and it was subconscious. So interesting with that.
Yeah, and so as we mentioned, the healthy emotions are in balance. And every now and then we have an emotion that's out of balance. It's disproportionate to what's happening. We're triggered. With emotions, they happen, as you're talking about with the subconscious level, they are triggered quicker than we can possibly know. So we have an emotional database. All of us have had a lifetime full of experiences and a range of emotions that are associated with them, whether we had maybe a parent who berated us or a parent that loved us, or a kid down the street that used to bully us. These things are stored. All these events are stored.
Right.
And so this is in our emotional database. Now we have this auto-appraiser, is what I'm going to call this subconscious thing. This auto-appraiser is constantly looking for things that are pleasurable and things to avoid to keep us alive.
Right, it's all about survival.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, when it works well, it's going to be scanning at a level we're not even aware of, looking for danger and looking for happiness. And when it sees something in the environment that is associated with our emotional database that triggers that, the emotional comes so fast we have no ability to change it or to do anything with our mind. It's happened before I can consciously realize it.
Yeah, sometimes it's almost like that 1-2 punch. You know, you go, oh, what did I say that for? What did I do that for?
Right.
That's what you're talking about, that type of situation.
We've all had the experience of just talking to someone, and as we're in a conversation, just deep tears maybe start coming out just out of nowhere. I recently was with a friend of mine. We were doing a retreat, and a beautiful location, wonderful location. I mean, mountains and rolling hills, and we're at a retreat center. We just got there, happy to be there, got her cup of tea. We sat down to have a cup of tea. As she sat down, this tears and sadness just her whole body instantly was just shook with sadness and pain. What had happened was, as she looked out the window, those rolling hills reminded her of the exact landscape of the last time she was in an environment like that, and she lost her best friend who died. And so out of nowhere, we weren't talking about this person, we weren't doing the visual stimulation of that, triggered that emotional response of sadness, and it all happened just like that. And so as we're talking about when it works well, though, here this is a part of our being, and it's sharing something. It also keeps us alive. We're driving a car. You and I are talking, driving a car. I'm not paying full attention, and out of the corner of the auto appraiser picks up, there's a kid running in front of the car. Before I can think, my foot is on the brake. I don't even know what's in front of the car, but automatically the auto appraiser, fear takes all of my awareness, focuses it here. My foot's on the brake, and it happens quicker than I can think. So the system, when it's working well, is incredible. When it's pulling up from a past of difficult emotional events, our emotion will arise in a way that is disproportionate to what's happening now. It's dredging that up.
Right.
And in that way, as you're talking about, we can get into a lot of trouble because instead of my rational mind, over my emotions, we've flipped. And when your emotions are triggered, we're in a refractory period where we cannot take in new information, and the emotion is now the lens through which we see everything.
Yeah, and a lot of that will stimulate or trigger us to survive, to cope, to deal with, and so forth. And so we'll find ways to do that, justify, rationalize, whatever, why we do certain things, just because that's the conscious mind and trying to come into play to work with that. I think one of the things going on right now in our society and in our valley here and so forth is that there's a lot of turmoil going on in the world. Whether you talk about Ferguson, whether you talk about the Middle East, and even, we talk about domestic violence, you talk about suicide and depression. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff going on. So we're not going to try to solve that, on this show. I will take a few shows to try to do that.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I think that it may be helpful to kind of address maybe some of the tools you use, some of the tools I use, so that people can at least get some insight as to, I mean, one of the solutions is don't watch the news type of situation, right? But in people's own inner world that they're dealing with, what are some of the ways that you think are helpful for people to start becoming aware, to start looking at this and start exploring it, and to really go back to take ownership of what's going on instead of just giving it lip service and say, okay, type of situation going on.
Yeah, okay. So coming back to, I mentioned there were sort of two aspects to how we don't really, or really are not able to cultivate this inner peace or this more balanced way of being with emotions. One is we really misperceive their intensity. If I get this job, I'm going to have it made. I'll be happy forever.
Mm-hmm.
I get the good job, and guess what? You still get angry and frustrated sometimes.
Right.
Go figure.
Right.
Or this will be devastating. We have this set point. But we can shift that whole set point. We can actually cultivate a level of inner wellness and well-being. And when I'm talking about genuine happiness, I'm talking about a sense of wholeness, a sense of wellness. It's not that I'm happy all the time. I'm sad when I lose someone. But underneath that, the analogy being it's the depth of the ocean, and the waves on top are the emotions and events of life. But the depth of the ocean is untouched, it's whole, and it's well. And so I can respond to events in a healthier way. So one step is to start to know that the external events in life that happen are stimulus-driven pleasures. They're only going to last a short time. If I have this thing that's terrible, it's not going to be terrible forever. If I have this thing that's good, it's not going to be good forever. And then the other piece that we're talking about is where my genuine well-being comes from. And that comes from being able to respond to life and initiate actions that are in alignment with my inner values, that are meaningful to a greater good. This is how people cultivate inner peace and well-being. And when they've looked at all the research and science on people with more inner peace and well-being, what it's leading to is a meaningful life. So yeah, things are going to happen. I could lose a leg tomorrow, or I could get a great job tomorrow, or these things are going to happen. Those do not determine any long-term well-being. What does determine it is how do I respond to life's events, and am I responding in a way that's ethical in my own values, not somebody else's values, not somebody else's rule book, my own inner values. The more I can have my life, my actions align with my values and be meaningful, in other words, be of benefit to a greater good out there, then I will create the inner resources to deal with injustice and the events of life, because I know those are temporary and impermanent. And the primary tool to start cultivating this would be around mindfulness meditation. There's really very few other ways. We can think about it all we want. We can talk about it all day long. You knowing that something is good will not make you more able to do it.
Right.
Right? You and I could both agree pretty reasonably. I could tell you, you know what? Worrying makes no sense at all. Does worry make any sense? I mean, if you have the resources to deal with the problem, you don't need to worry. And if you don't, worrying about it won't make it any different. I mean, there's no logic to worry.
Right.
We could talk about that. You could know it. Well, try not to worry now.
Right.
Intellectual knowledge is not going to change that. We all have in our when we're quiet, this is what I would like to do, and I know better, and then I do something different. Because we have habits and tendencies, and that's sort of hardwired in certain ways in our consciousness. But we can change all that. And we can change that through a method of actually rewiring our own neurotransmitters and all that. Neurons that fire together, wire together, and make new pathways. And this is done through mindfulness meditation. And learning through this that when you're in a meditative state, you can watch emotions come and go. You can observe them come and go without attaching to them. It's not I'm happy. Well, there's happiness I'm experiencing. Here's sadness. Here's sadness I'm experiencing. It will come and go. And what you'll learn in that process, you really learn and know, not think about, is I am not my emotions.
Yeah.
They're temporary. They're impermanent. And if you can develop some reasoning, well then when the emotions come, the sooner we can bring awareness into it, I now have some choice as to how to respond. Typically, we don't have choice. Typically, the emotion comes, It's there, speed of light, boom. I'm in the emotion, and now everything I see is through the emotion. The emotion seems much bigger than it is, right? If I'm lonely, guess what? I'm so lonely. No one will ever love me. I'm not lovable. I'll never have anyone. This tape will play, and it's all through the lens of this sadness.
Yeah. So, yeah, powerful information. And I think a lot of it, what we're talking about really comes down, this awareness, and the meditation is a huge point. And I think, there are some other parts, but at least that starts to give folks out there an idea of what's involved and what's available. And so if they're in these challenging places, that, hey, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train. And I don't mean to say that and to make it sound trite, but there are things that you can do, and realize that those are some of the choices that can happen. So, John, just how can people get a hold of you in the workshops that you're doing and so forth?
Yeah, well, you can look us up at the Mindful Life Program. That's www.mindfullifeprogram.org, or the Way of Compassion Foundation. So we have a nonprofit foundation called the Way of Compassion also, and that's wayofcompassion.org. On Wednesdays, we do events in Carbondale around Dharma and meditation for the Way of Compassion. On Monday nights, we have mindfulness, open Mindfulness Mondays. So anyone can come and do a little meditation and get a mindfulness practice for the week.
Oh, really? And that's what time and where?
That's Mondays, 7:30 p.m. at the 3rd Street Center in Carbondale. And on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. is the Dharma teaching and meditation through the Way of Compassion, also at the 3rd Street Center.
Oh, okay, great. So thank you very much for being here. Always a treat, and enjoy the topics and the work that you're doing. And I think it's just fascinating. Hopefully people will enjoy and take some of this to heart and apply it to their life. So so thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Great, thanks. So my guest today has been John Bruna with Mindfulness, Mindful
Life Program.
Mindful Life Program. And so also want to thank Aspen Core Realty for making these shows possible and getting this information out to you. My name's Dr. Tom Lankering. You've been watching Healthy Lifestyles. Thanks, and make it a great day.
Aspen Core Realty provides exceptional residential real estate brokerage services in the core, West End, and greater Aspen areas. Realtors Sally Kristen Markozinski offer over 30 years of combined brokerage experience in the Aspen real estate market. They also provide insightful Aspen market valuations for Aspen properties. More information can be found at aspencorerealty.com or by calling 970-309-0444. Aspen Core Realty, specialists in the core and West End of Aspen.